Daniel walked down the wide street of the neutral colony world called Haven's Reach. The air smelled of warm metal and spice, mixed from the many alien markets that lined the road. Ships from half a dozen worlds stood in the skyport above, lights blinking against the pale morning sun. Daniel usually loved this place. It was the one world where humans and aliens could trade without fear, where wars and borders seemed to pause. But today he felt no peace. His orders weighed heavy on his mind. The message had arrived at dawn. It was short, sealed with the crest of the Syrian Empire. You are summoned to the palace of Queen Arasha. Present yourself at once. No explanation, no detail. A simple call, but everyone on Haven's Reach knew what it meant. The Syrians did not summon lightly. As Daniel approached the high walls of the Syrian palace, he noticed the stairs. Syrians with tall frames and scaled skin turned their glowing eyes on him. Other humans stepped aside, as though distance would protect them. Few humans were ever invited to stand before the queen. Fewer still walked out with their dignity. At the gates, 2 Syrian guards stood unmoving, their armor shining like polished stone. Their faces were unreadable, but their weapons hummed faintly. One of them stepped forward, scanning Daniel with a handheld device. "Daniel Hale," the guard said, his voice deep and calm. "You are expected. Follow." The gates opened with a sound like grinding stone. Inside, the palace was built of crystal walls that caught the sunlight and bent it into 100 colors. The halls stretched wide, filled with echoes of footsteps. Daniel kept his head high, but inside his chest his heart thumped fast. He remembered the stories. Queen Arasha was no ordinary ruler. She had guided the Syrian Empire for decades, holding it strong while others crumbled. Many feared her, many admired her, but none ignored her. If she summoned him, it was not by mistake. The guard led him to a great door carved with markings Daniel could not read. Beyond it lay the throne room. The doors swung open, and Daniel stepped inside. The hall was vast. The floor shone like dark glass. Tall pillars reached upward, carved with silver lines that pulsed faintly with light. At the far end, raised upon a high platform, sat the throne of the Syrian queen, and upon it sat Arasha herself. She was taller than most humans, her skin a pale shade of silver with faint patterns that shifted like flowing water. Her eyes glowed, faint green, calm yet sharp, and her crown was no simple metal band but living crystal that pulsed with energy. The sight of her made Daniel stop for a moment, but he forced himself to walk forward. He reached the center of the hall and bowed, not too low, but enough to show respect without weakness. "Daniel Hale," the queen's voice filled the chamber, smooth yet powerful. "You stand before me." Her words echoed, carried by hidden amplifiers. Daniel lifted his head, meeting her eyes. "Yes, my queen," he answered. His voice sounded steady, though his chest tightened. The queen leaned forward slightly, her gaze piercing. "You wonder why you are here? I will not keep you guessing. It is about my daughter, Princess Mira." Daniel's mind froze. Mira. He had not seen her for months, but he remembered her well. A young Syrian princess with curious eyes, always asking questions about humans, about Earth, about stories of soldiers and explorers. He had spoken with her during trade meetings, sometimes by accident, sometimes by her choice. Once, he had even saved her from danger when a border skirmish spilled onto Haven's Reach. It had not seemed important at the time. He had only done what anyone should. But to be summoned by the queen because of her daughter, that was something else entirely. The queen's voice sharpened. "My daughter speaks your name too often. She speaks of human honor and loyalty as if they are greater than the values of her own people. She has begun to question our traditions. And the source, Daniel Hale, is you. The chamber grew colder, though the air had not changed. Daniel felt the weight of every Syrian eye in the room, guards and advisors watching. One wrong word, and he might not leave. He kept his voice calm. I did not mean to cause offense, my queen. Arasha raised her hand. Meaning does not matter. Results matter. A princess of the Syrian throne now speaks with a human's voice. She trusts you. More than she should. I will know why. Daniel stood straight. His palms were damp, but he refused to lower his eyes. Because I treated her with respect. Because when danger came, I did not ask if she was Syrian or human. I only acted to keep her safe. The queen's expression did not change. For a long moment, silence filled the hall. Then she asked softly, "Do you think that makes you worthy of her trust?" Daniel hesitated. He remembered Mira's smile when she spoke of human bravery. He remembered her questions about Earth's long struggles, how people rebuilt after every loss. She had listened as if those stories were treasures. "I do not claim worthiness," Daniel said at last. "I only gave her honesty. Perhaps that is what she trusts." The queen's eyes narrowed slightly. She did not speak, and her silence was heavier than any words. Daniel felt the weight pressing on him, but he did not break his gaze. At that moment, the doors at the side of the hall opened. Footsteps echoed. A familiar voice spoke clear and strong. "Mother," I asked him here. Daniel turned. Princess Mira walked into the hall. She was smaller than her mother, her silver skin brighter, her eyes filled with determination. She moved, passed the guards without fear, and stopped beside Daniel. "He is no threat," Mira said firmly. "He is my friend." Daniel's breath caught. The hall seemed to freeze. Queen Arasha's gaze shifted from Daniel to her daughter. For the first time, Daniel saw surprise in her eyes. The throne room was silent. Daniel stood with Mira at his side, and all around him Syrian guards tightened their grip on their weapons. Queen Arasha's sharp gaze moved between her daughter and the human officer, her expression unreadable. Daniel's mind raced. He had expected a test, a question, maybe even anger, but he had not expected Mira herself to appear. Her words were bold, too bold, and he feared they would bring more trouble. Yet the princess looked calm, her shoulders straight, her eyes fixed, on her mother with defiance. "Mira," the queen said at last, her voice slow and measured, "you were not called here." "I came because Daniel should not stand alone," Mira replied. Her voice was firm, though Daniel saw her hand tremble slightly at her side. "If you question him, then you must also question me. It was I who chose to speak with him, I who sought his stories, I who trusted his words." Whispers rippled through the chamber. Advisors leaned toward one another. Guards shifted uneasily. For a Syrian princess to speak so openly before the throne was rare, almost unthinkable. Queen Arasha's eyes flashed brighter, though her face remained calm. "You speak as if this human deserves such honor," she said. "You speak as if he has a place among us." Mira lifted her chin. "He saved my life. When the border fight spilled into Haven's Reach, he did not think of his own safety. He shielded me when others turned away. If that does not earn respect, then what does?" Daniel felt the weight of her words press against him. He wanted to stop her, to tell her to be careful, but it was too late. The queen leaned back in her throne, her gaze now fixed on Daniel once more. "You hear, my daughter," Arasha said. "She raises you above her own kind. Do you deny that you encourage this?" Daniel took a slow breath. He knew that any hesitation could be seen as weakness. "No, my queen," he said. "I never told her to favor humans. I only answered her questions." I only spoke the truth of who we are. The queen tilted her head. The truth, as you call it. Tell me then, Daniel Hale, what truth did you give her that she cannot find among her own people? The question struck deep. Daniel's mind went back to the long conversations with Mira, the quiet evenings in the colony gardens where she asked about human history, about battles and struggles, about how Earth had survived despite endless trials. He remembered the way she had listened when he spoke of sacrifice, of ordinary men and women standing for one another even when the cost was high. I told her, Daniel said, his voice steady, that humans have no empire, no great throne that holds the stars. We have only ourselves bound by trust. We stand together because alone we fall. I told her that we do not endure because of power, but because we never give up on each other. The chamber fell quiet again. Daniel's words echoed against the crystal walls. Mira nodded quickly, her face bright with conviction. That is what I told you, Mother. Humans fight not only for land or pride, they fight for one another. That is why I believe him. The queen raised her hand, silencing her daughter. Her expression did not soften. You speak of loyalty, of courage, of trust. Fine words. But words are wind, Daniel Hale. They shift with the speaker. My daughter listens because she is young, because she is curious. But I do not listen so easily. Do you claim that humans, who war among themselves, who break alliances and betray promises, are worthy of teaching my daughter anything? Daniel felt a spark of anger rise in his chest, but he controlled it. He understood what she was doing. She was testing him, pushing him, waiting to see if he would bend or stand. He chose to stand. Humans are not perfect, he said firmly. We make mistakes. We fight. We argue. We break. But we also rebuild. We forgive. We try again. That is why Mira listened. Not because we are greater, but because even in failure, we rise. For the first time, Daniel thought he saw a flicker of something in the queen's eyes. Not agreement, not approval, but a glimmer of thought. Still, her voice stayed sharp. You speak boldly, human. Yet boldness is easy when you have nothing to lose. My daughter has everything to lose. If she follows your way of thinking, she risks her duty, her place, her future. And if she risks it, I will know it was you who led her astray. The words hit like stone. Daniel felt the hall grow heavy again, the weight of the queen's judgment pressing down on him. He looked at Mira, who stood beside him without fear, and then back to the throne. I did not lead her astray, Daniel said slowly. She chose her own path. I only showed her mine. The queen's eyes narrowed. Her fingers drummed lightly on the arm of the throne. The sound echoed faintly in the quiet hall. Then she leaned forward, her voice low but cutting. Do you love her human? The question stunned him. The air seemed to freeze. Mira's eyes widened, and even the guards looked startled. Daniel opened his mouth, but no sound came. Love? He had never thought of it in those words. Mira was his friend, his companion in moments of peace, someone who listened with a warmth rare among aliens. But love? Daniel straightened his shoulders. I respect her, he said firmly. I value her. I would protect her as I would any who trust me. That is all I will claim. The queen's gaze lingered on him for a long moment. Then she leaned. Back again, her expression unreadable. You speak carefully, she said. Perhaps wisely. Yet know this, Daniel Hale. My daughter is of the Syrian throne. Any human who dares touch her path touches mine. And those who touch my path must prove their worth or be crushed beneath it. Daniel did not flinch. Then test me, he said. The hall grew still. Mira gasped softly, and the advisors exchanged startled looks. Few ever spoke so directly to the queen, but Daniel did not look away. For a moment, silence hung heavy. Then the queen gave a slow, thin smile. It was not warmth, but it was something new. "Very well," she said. "If you wish a test, you shall have it. We will see if your truth holds when placed in fire." Daniel bowed his head once, not as submission, but as acceptance. The path ahead would be harder than anything before, but he was ready. Mira looked at him with a mixture of fear and pride, her voice barely above a whisper. "You should not have said that." Daniel gave her the faintest smile. "I had to." The queen's eyes watched them both, her silence more dangerous than her words. The true trial was coming. The hall was still heavy with silence after the queen's declaration. Daniel stood straight, his heart steady now, though he knew the path ahead was uncertain. The queen had promised him a test, and though she had not said what it would be, he understood it would decide everything. Mira remained beside him, her silver skin glowing faintly under the crystal light of the throne room. She had not stepped back even once. Her courage gave him strength, yet he worried for her. The queen's words had been sharp, and no mother who ruled an empire would take defiance from her daughter lightly. "Daniel Hale," Queen Arasha said, her voice slow and commanding, "you speak boldly of truth and loyalty, but boldness is easy when spoken in safety. What will you speak when you stand against me and my throne?" Daniel was about to answer, but Mira stepped forward before he could. "I will speak for him," Mira said firmly. The chamber stirred again. Advisors shifted uncomfortably. The guards exchanged glances. A princess interrupting the queen was rare. Enough, but to do so in defense of a human was unheard of. Arasha's gaze hardened. "Mira," she said, her tone colder, "this is not your place. Step back." But Mira did not move. She lifted her chin, her voice strong though her hands trembled, slightly at her sides. "It is my place, mother, for it is my name you question. It is my heart you test when you test him." Daniel looked at her, surprised by her words. He had known she was brave, but now she stood not only for herself but for him as well. Arasha's eyes narrowed. "Speak then," she said, leaning forward. "Speak and let this hall hear why you stand with him." Mira drew a deep breath. Her gaze swept across the chamber, meeting the eyes of guards and advisors before resting on her mother. "When the border fight came to Haven's Reach," she began, her voice steady, "many of our kind fled. They said the battle was not ours, that we should wait for soldiers." But Daniel did not flee. He stood in the path of danger. He shielded me when blasts struck the walls. He carried me to safety, though his own body bled. I saw his strength. I saw his courage. He saved me when no one else would. The words cut through the chamber like clear water. Daniel shifted uneasily. He had never told anyone what happened that day in such detail, and hearing it from her lips stirred both pride and discomfort. He had not done it for recognition. He had done it because it was right. Mira continued, her voice rising. "Since then, I have listened to him. I have asked him of his people. He speaks not with pride of conquest or power. He speaks of family, of friends, of bonds that hold even when worlds fall. He does not pretend humans are perfect. He says they fail, they stumble, they fight among themselves, but still they rise again. That is why I believe him. That is why I trust him." She turned, looking at Daniel for a moment, and her eyes softened. "That is why I stand with him." The hall grew silent again. Even the faint hum of the guards' weapons seemed to fade. Queen Arasha studied her daughter closely. Her face was calm, but her glowing eyes betrayed a storm of thought. At last she spoke. "You say you trust him because he saved you," she said. "You say you trust him because of his words, but you are young, Mira. trust is a fragile thing. It can be shaped, it can be broken. How do you know this human has not shaped you for his own purpose? Mira's eyes flared with anger. Because he never asked me for anything, she said quickly. He never sought my crown, my wealth, my power. He gave without demand. He spoke without seeking reward. If he wished to use me, he would have done so long ago. Daniel felt the heat of her words and wished to stop her, but he knew he could not. This was her truth, and it was stronger than anything he could say. The Queen's gaze moved back to Daniel. Do you hear her, human? She places her faith in you. She risks her standing in this court for you. If you fail her, you do more than betray her. You betray the crown itself. Do you carry that weight? Daniel met her eyes. I do, he said firmly. And I will not fail her. The Queen leaned back, her fingers tapping the arm of her throne. The sound echoed faintly in the silence. Then she turned to her advisors. Speak, she commanded. An elder Syrian stepped forward, his skin dark and lined with silver patterns. My queen, he said, bowing low, the princess is precious. If she places her trust in this human, we must guard her more closely. Humans are clever, but their ways are not ours. This one may mean well, but his kind have often sown chaos where they tread. Another advisor, a woman with pale blue scales, spoke next. And yet, my queen, the human's courage is known. Reports of his actions at Haven's Reach have reached even distant worlds. To dismiss him would be to dismiss the truth of what he did. The hall rippled with low voices, some in support, some in doubt. Daniel stood silently, waiting, knowing that the Queen's word would cut through them all. At last, Arasha raised her hand, and silence fell once more. She looked at Mira, then at Daniel, and her eyes glowed brighter. You both speak strongly, she said, but words are only the beginning. If I am to accept that my daughter places her faith wisely, I must see proof with my own eyes. Not tales, not memories, but living proof. Daniel's chest tightened. Here it was, the test. What proof do you ask, my queen? He said. Arasha's gaze was cold but steady. There are whispers of betrayal within my court. Shadows move where light should shine. If you are as true as you claim, if your loyalty is more than talk, then you will stand in the storm of this palace and reveal what hides in darkness. Do this, and I will know your worth. Daniel's heart pounded, but he bowed his head slightly. I accept. Mira stepped forward quickly. Mother, if he must face this, then I will stand with him. Arasha's eyes narrowed. And if I forbid it? Mira's voice was quiet but firm. Then I will still stand with him. The Queen's expression did not change, but Daniel thought he saw a flicker of something, perhaps pride, perhaps anger. She leaned back in her throne once more. Very well, she said. The both of you will face what comes. If you succeed, I will listen. If you fail, neither of you will leave this hall again. The words hung heavy in the air. Daniel glanced at Mira, and she looked back at him. Neither spoke, but both understood. Their bond had been sealed not by choice, but by the trial that now lay ahead. The doors of the throne room closed with a heavy sound after the Queen's command. Daniel stood in the center of the hall, the eyes of the Syrian court fixed on him. He could feel the pressure of every glance, like weight pressing against his chest. Mira stood beside him, calm in her stance, but her breathing faintly quickened. Queen Arasha leaned forward in her throne, her voice sharp and steady. You say you will accept my test. Very well. But before the test begins, speak once more. Tell me, human. Why should I believe that your kind has anything to give my daughter? Speak clearly, for these may be the last words you offer in this hall. The room fell silent. Even the hum of the guards' weapons seemed to fade. Daniel drew, in a breath, his mind steadying. He had spoken before, but this was different. Now the queen demanded an answer, not for Mira's sake, but for her own judgment. Daniel raised his head and let his voice carry across the chamber. Because humans do not survive by strength alone. We survive by standing together. We protect those who trust us. We rise when we fall. That is the only gift I give your daughter, not riches, not power, not conquest. Only the promise that I will never abandon her. The queen's eyes narrowed, her face still unreadable. You speak as though loyalty is rare, she said. Do you think Syrians do not know loyalty? Daniel shook his head. I do not say that. But loyalty is not measured when the skies are clear. It is measured when everything falls apart. Humans know this because we have been broken many times, yet we continue. That is why Mira listened. Not because we are greater than you, but because she saw something in us that reminded her of what matters most. Mira stepped forward then, her voice rising with emotion. Yes, Mother. That is why I believe him. You ask why I trust him more than others. It is because he does not bow to fear. He speaks to me not as a princess, but as a person. He treats me as one who chooses her own path. That is why I stand with him. The queen's gaze shifted to her daughter. You speak boldly, child. You would risk the judgment of your people. For this man, I would, Mira answered, her voice steady. Because his truth is one that our people have forgotten. We rule with power, but we forget the strength of simple bonds. He reminded me. The court rippled with whispers again. Some advisors frowned, others looked thoughtful. The guards kept their stance, but their eyes flickered with curiosity. Daniel could feel the balance of the chamber shifting, though the queen remained unmoved. Arasha rose slowly from her throne. Her presence filled the hall, her silver skin glowing brighter as light caught the edges of her crown. Words, she said coldly. Still only words. If you would prove them, you will do more than speak. She stepped down from her throne, each step ringing against the glassy floor. Daniel felt the air tighten as she approached. She stopped a few steps away, her eyes locked on his. You claim loyalty, she said. You claim courage. Then I will see them tested. My palace is not as strong as it appears. There are traitors in these walls. Whispers of betrayal have reached me. Shadows hide in places even I cannot see. If you are as true as my daughter believes, then find them. Expose them. Show me that your loyalty is not only to her, but to the truth itself. Daniel's pulse quickened. This was no small task. To find traitors in the heart of the Syrian Empire's palace was to step into danger greater than any battlefield. But he saw Mira beside him, her eyes steady with trust, and he felt no fear. I accept, Daniel said. His voice carried across the hall, calm and clear. The queen studied him for a long moment. Then she turned to Mira. And you, child, will you stand beside him in this? Mira's eyes burned bright. I will. Wherever he goes, I go. Arasha's expression did not change, but her silence carried meaning. She turned back to her throne, her voice echoing as she gave her command. Then let it be done. You have until the next rise of the sun to bring me proof. Fail, and you will both fall. The hall shifted as the queen sat once more. Guards stepped forward to escort them, but she raised her hand. No. Let them walk freely. If they are true, they need no chains. Daniel bowed slightly, then turned to leave with Mira. As the heavy doors closed behind them, the murmurs of the court rose once more, a storm of voices debating what they had just witnessed. Outside, the hall, the palace corridors stretched in gleaming crystal light. Mira walked at Daniel's side, her pace quick and tense. When they were far enough from the throne room, she spoke in a low voice. You should not have accepted so quickly, she said, though her tone was more worried than angry. Daniel glanced at her. What choice did I have? If I refused, your mother would have ended it there. Mira sighed, her shoulders sinking slightly. I know, but the palace is full of eyes and ears. If there are traitors, they will be watching us already. They will not let us move freely without danger. Daniel gave her a faint smile. Then we will move carefully, and we will find them. They walked down a corridor lined with tall windows that looked over the gardens of the palace. The light of the twin suns of Haven's Reach spread across the horizon, painting the crystal walls in shades of gold and red. Daniel paused, looking out, his mind working. Mira, he said quietly, your mother thinks I led you, but I think it is the other way. You chose this path. Now we must walk it together. Mira looked at him, her expression softening. Then, let us walk it without fear. As they moved deeper into the palace, shadows followed them. Hidden figures watched from the corners, unseen by most, but felt by Daniel's instincts. He knew the Queen's test had already begun. Every step, every word, every glance would be measured by enemies who wanted him gone. But he also knew one thing with certainty. He would not let Mira fall. The night ahead would decide everything. The palace corridors stretched endlessly, lit by glowing crystals that pulsed faintly like living veins in the walls. Daniel walked with Mira at his side, every step echoing against the floor of polished stone. Behind them, the sound of the throne. Room faded, but the weight of the Queen's words still pressed on them. You have until the next rise of the sun to bring me proof. Daniel repeated the command in his mind. It was less than a day. Time short enough to be a trap, yet long. Enough for betrayal to show itself if they searched wisely. Mira's face was tight with thought. Her steps were steady, but her eyes scanned the hall, watching shadows and corners. The Queen meant every word, she said at last. If we fail, she will not forgive. Not even me. Daniel glanced at her. Then we cannot fail. They turned a corner into a quieter wing of the palace. Here the walls were narrower, the halls less crowded. The faint scent of flowers drifted in from gardens outside, yet the silence carried tension. Daniel could feel unseen eyes following them. Where do we begin? He asked. Mira slowed her pace, her brow furrowed. Whispers of betrayal. I have heard rumors. Nobles unhappy with my mother's rule. Some say she has grown too close to human trade. Others believe she has grown too cautious, too unwilling to expand our borders. If there are traitors, they will be among the nobles. Daniel nodded. Then we need to listen. We need to see who moves in secret. Mira stopped suddenly, pulling him toward a narrow archway that led into a side hall. Her voice dropped to a whisper. The council chambers. At this hour, some advisors may already gather there. If they speak, it will not be for us to hear, unless we find a way. They slipped through the side passage, moving carefully. The hall opened into a balcony overlooking a wide chamber below. Syrian nobles stood in groups, their scaled skin glinting under the crystal light. Daniel and Mira crouched low, hidden behind the carved railing. The voices below rose and fell. At first they spoke of trade, of border disputes, of ordinary matters. But then one voice grew sharper. The Queen grows blind, the noble said. She listens to her daughter's foolish words. She even listens to the human. Another voice replied, It cannot continue. If she ties herself to humans, she weakens the throne. We must act before her rule becomes ruin. Daniel felt Mira, tense beside him. He kept his hand lightly on her arm to steady her. They listened as the voices spoke of hidden allies, of plans to disrupt the Queen's council. They will meet tonight, one noble whispered. In the East Wing, where no guards patrol. There we will decide how to move against her. Daniel's mind sharpened. This was the proof they needed. But it was not enough to overhear. They needed to expose them fully, with evidence that could not be denied. As the nobles left the chamber, Mira leaned close. We must follow. If they see us, it will be over. Daniel gave her a small nod. Then we move like shadows. They trailed the group through winding halls, careful to stay hidden. The nobles walked with confidence, never looking back, certain no one dared spy within the queen's palace. Daniel's soldier training guided his steps, each movement silent, each corner taken with care. Mira followed smoothly, her light frame moving as quietly as his own. At last, the nobles entered a tall chamber in the East Wing. The doors closed behind them, but Daniel and Mira found a narrow slit in the crystal wall where faint light spilled through. Pressing close, they listened. Inside, the voices rose again, filled with anger. "The queen must be removed," one said. "Her daughter is already lost to the human. If she places him beside her, our empire will fall to weakness." "Then strike soon," another answered. "Strike while her faith in him blinds her." Daniel felt a cold weight in his chest. This was no simple discontent. It was open conspiracy. If they waited longer, the queen herself could fall victim to their plan. Mira's face paled. Mother was right. The shadows are already here. Daniel placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Then we bring them into the light." They moved, back through the hall, careful not to be seen. When they were safe, Mira spoke quickly. "We must return to her. She must know what we heard." Daniel shook his head. "Not yet. If we go back with only words, the traitors will deny everything. We need proof that cannot be denied." Mira hesitated, then nodded slowly. "You are right. But how?" Daniel's eyes narrowed as he thought. "If they meet tonight, they will bring more than words. They will bring marks of loyalty, signs of their pact. We catch them in the act, and the queen will have her proof." Mira's voice dropped to a whisper. "And if they catch us first?" Daniel gave her a faint smile. "Then we fight." The suns dipped lower as evening drew near. Shadows stretched across the palace floors, and the air grew cooler. Daniel and Mira waited in a quiet alcove near the East Wing, hidden from sight. The doors to the conspirators' chamber stood closed, faint light glowing beneath them. Mira's hand rested near the dagger at her side, though her people rarely used such weapons. Daniel checked the small blade he carried, more symbol than strength against armored Syrians, but he trusted his skill more than the steel. At last, movement stirred. The doors opened and nobles slipped out, carrying small crystal seals glowing, faint red. Daniel's eyes sharpened, symbols of their pact, proof of their betrayal. Before he could move, a guard appeared at the end of the hall. His eyes locked on Daniel and Mira instantly. "Stop!" the guard commanded, his weapon humming to life. The nobles froze, shock flashing across their faces. One quickly hissed, "It is them, the human and the princess. They spy on us." The hall erupted in chaos. The nobles shouted, the guard raised his weapon, and Mira pulled Daniel toward the nearest exit. Blasts of light struck the walls as they ran, the crystal halls flashing with every impact. Daniel moved fast, guiding Mira through narrow corridors he had memorized earlier. They darted into the gardens, the cool night air hitting their faces. Behind them, shouts echoed as more guards joined the chase. "We cannot outrun the whole palace," Mira said, her breath sharp. "We do not need to outrun them," Daniel replied. "We only need to reach your mother first." They raced toward the central tower, every step echoing against the stone paths of the garden. The seals glowed faintly in the nobles' hands behind them, still clutched in panic. Daniel knew if they reached the throne room with those seals, the truth would be shown to all. The night had grown heavy over the Syrian palace. 2 moons hung above, their silver light falling through the crystal windows and painting the halls in sharp lines of shadow. Daniel and Mira ran together, their steps quick but steady, their breath rising in the cold air. Behind them, the sound of armored feet thundered like a drum. The nobles' shouts carried through the halls. Some cried for guards, others screamed that traitors had been found. To any listener, it sounded as if Mira and Daniel were the guilty ones. Daniel knew this was the enemy's plan. Turn the palace against them before they could reach the queen. Mira glanced at him, her dark eyes burning with urgency. If the guards believe their lies, they will stop us before we ever reach her. Daniel's mind raced. He had been trained in war, but not in palace politics. Yet here, speed and clarity mattered more than swords. Then we cannot slow down. We must force our way through. They turned a sharp corner into a grand hallway lined with banners of the royal crest. At Ba, the far end, 2 guards blocked the way. Their weapons glowed, ready to strike. "Halt!" one called, his voice firm. "By order of the council, you will surrender." Mira stepped forward, her voice commanding. "I am Princess Mira. Stand aside, or you defy the crown." The guards hesitated. Daniel could see doubt in their eyes, but also fear. The nobles must have told them Mira was compromised. The moment stretched thin, like glass ready to shatter. Then, one guard raised his weapon. "Forgive me, Princess, but orders are clear." The strike came fast, a flash of light burning through the air. Daniel pulled Mira aside, the beam missing by inches. The blast struck the wall, sending shards of crystal scattering across the floor. Daniel reacted at once, surging forward. His blade caught the guard's weapon arm, knocking it aside. The Syrian stumbled back, unprepared for the humans. Speed. Mira drew her dagger, her movement sharp and precise. She struck the second guard's weapon, sending it clattering across the floor. Her voice rang clear. "We fight for the queen. If you strike us again, you side with her enemies." The guards froze. One clutched his wounded arm. The other looked, shaken. Neither pressed forward again. Daniel grabbed Mira's hand, pulling her onward before reinforcements arrived. They raced through another set of halls, their path leading toward the central tower where the queen resided. But already more voices echoed from behind, the nobles driving guards after them like hunters pushing prey into a trap. Mira's breath came fast. "They will close every passage. Soon there will be no way forward." Daniel's eyes searched the halls. Then he spotted a narrow stairwell curling upward toward the higher balconies. He pointed. "There, we climb." The stairwell was steep, the walls close. Their footsteps rang against the stone as they ascended, every step an effort, as the sound of pursuit drew nearer below. At last, they reached a high balcony overlooking the throne chamber itself. The sight struck Daniel with awe even in the rush of danger. The throne chamber was vast, its floor of polished stone reflecting the glow of thousands of crystals above. At the far end sat the queen, regal upon her seat of silver and jade. Advisors and guards filled the hall, their attention fixed on her. But, before Daniel could speak, the doors below burst open. The nobles rushed in, their faces full of false anger. One lifted a glowing seal in his hand, his voice loud and sure. "My queen, the traitors are here. Your daughter and the human spy have turned against us. We caught them plotting in secret." Gasps filled the chamber. The queen's eyes narrowed, her gaze flicking upward toward the balcony. Daniel felt Mira stiffen beside him. "If we wait, they win," Daniel whispered. "We must act now." Mira nodded once. Together they leapt down from the balcony, landing hard upon the polished floor. Guards moved at once, weapons raised, but the queen lifted her hand, halting them. "Speak," she commanded, her voice like steel. Daniel stepped forward, his voice strong. "They lie." It is they who plot against you. We heard them with our own ears. They met in secret, and they swore to remove you from the throne. They carry proof even now." Mira pointed to the seals the nobles still clutched. "The red glow marks their pact. If you command it, examine the seals. You will see they are bound to treachery." The chamber fell silent. Every eye turned to the queen. The nobles began to protest, their words spilling over each other, but their voices cracked with fear. The queen rose slowly from her throne. Her tall form seemed to fill the hall with power. She stretched out her hand. "Bring me the seals." The nobles hesitated. One stepped back, another tried to hide his seal within his robe. But guards moved swiftly now, no longer fooled. They seized the nobles, tearing the glowing seals from their hands. The crystals were carried to the queen, their red light pulsing like embers of betrayal. She held them high, her voice ringing across the hall. "Here is the truth. You would betray the crown, and in your pride you thought to turn my own blood against me. But the shadow cannot hide forever." The nobles struggled, but the guards forced them to their knees. The hall filled with a roar of voices, some shocked, some relieved, as the weight of betrayal was laid bare for all to see. Daniel stood at Mira's side, his chest heaving with the force of the chase. For a moment, silence stretched between them and the queen. Then her gaze softened slightly. "You have done as I commanded," she said. "The proof is clear. The traitors are unmasked." Relief washed through Daniel, though he kept his posture firm. Mira lowered her dagger at last, though her eyes still burned with fire. But the queen was not yet finished. Her gaze turned cold again as she looked upon her daughter and the human. "You have shown courage. You have shown loyalty. But understand, this tonight was not only a test of shadows. It was also a test of you." Her words hung heavy in the air. Daniel felt the weight of them, though he did not yet know what they meant. Mira bowed her head slightly, but her voice was steady. "Then, we await your judgment, Mother." The queen's eyes lingered on Daniel for a long moment before she turned away, motioning for the guards to take the traitors from her sight. The chamber buzzed with whispers, but Daniel's mind remained sharp. They had survived the chase, unmasked, the betrayal, and brought truth before the throne. Yet the queen's test was not over. Something deeper waited still, something tied not only to the throne, but to Daniel himself. The throne room was quiet again, though tension lingered in the crystal air. The nobles had been removed, their glowing seals taken as proof of betrayal. Guards stood at attention, their weapons lowered, but every eye remained on the queen. Daniel and Mira stood together near the center, the weight of the past hours pressing on them. Queen Arasha's eyes glowed softly, reflecting the twin moons outside the palace windows. Her gaze moved from Mira to Daniel and back. "You have acted with courage," she said at last. "You faced those who would harm the crown. You brought truth to light where shadows sought to hide it. That is no small task." Mira exhaled, her shoulders relaxing slightly, though her eyes remained alert. Daniel kept his posture steady, feeling the tension slowly ease, but not completely gone. He had passed the first part of her test, but the queen's judgment would determine more than just the fate of the traitors. The queen's voice dropped, her tone deeper, filled with thought. "Yet courage alone does not bind trust. Loyalty alone does not earn place at this court. You, human, came without title, without name in Syria. You carried only your words, your strength, and your truth. You faced danger to protect my daughter, and yet I must decide if your truth is worthy of more than temporary favor." Daniel kept his gaze steady. "I accept your judgment, my queen. I have done only what I believe right. I ask nothing more." than to continue in your service, as protector to your daughter if you deem it fitting." Arasha studied him carefully. Then she turned her attention fully to Mira. "And you, my child, you chose to stand with this human even when the court whispered against him. You risked your standing, your reputation, your future. Tell me, why do you trust him so completely?" Mira lifted her head, her silver skin glowing in the soft light. "Because he never asked for anything in return. Because he showed me what loyalty means, not with words, but with action. He protects those who trust him, not for reward, not for power, but because it is right. I trust him because he is true." The queen leaned back, folding her hands, her face unreadable. Silence filled the room. Even the guards held their breath, sensing the weight of the decision about to be made. At last, Arasha spoke again. "Then, hear my judgment. Daniel Hale, human of Earth, you have acted not as a visitor to this palace, not as an outsider, but as one who honors truth above all. You faced danger, exposed treachery, and remained loyal even when the cost was high. For this you have earned the place of trust beside my daughter." Daniel's chest tightened. He bowed low, not as submission, but as gratitude. "I will serve with all my strength, my queen." Arasha's gaze shifted to Mira. "And you, Princess Mira, have shown discernment, courage, and wisdom beyond your years. You saw beyond the surface, and you chose the path of truth. You have my recognition and my permission to continue your bond with this human under the watch of my court." Mira's eyes shone with relief and pride. She bowed low to her mother. "Thank you, mother. I will honor your trust." The queen rose from her throne, the light of her presence filling the hall. She looked at the nobles who had been brought forward earlier. "Let this be a lesson. Shadows may move unseen, but the truth will always be revealed, and those who betray the crown will answer for their deeds." The nobles lowered their heads, the weight of their betrayal clear to all. Guards moved among them, ensuring they would not escape further punishment. The court watched in silence, absorbing the strength and fairness of the queen's decision. Daniel stepped forward slightly. "My queen, I have one more promise," he said. His voice was steady. "I will protect the throne and the princess. From any threat, I will not falter, and I will not betray your trust. Your people, your empire, and your daughter will find in me a steadfast ally." Arasha's eyes softened, just slightly. "Then go forth with this promise. Let it be known that truth, courage, and loyalty are valued here above all else. Human, your place beside the princess is earned, and by my command it shall be recognized in the court." Mira stepped closer to Daniel. "We have done it," she whispered, though her voice carried the relief and quiet triumph of one who had faced great danger. Daniel gave her a small nod. "Yes, together we faced the shadow. Together we have passed the queen's test." The queen's voice rose, ringing across the chamber. "Let the court remember this night. Let all who serve Syria see that courage is not measured by title, but by action. That loyalty is not bought, but proven. And that truth, no matter how small, can guide even the greatest empire." The court erupted in quiet murmurs, some in admiration, others in reflection. Guards returned to their posts, though their eyes held respect for the human who had stood so firm beside the princess. Arasha turned her gaze finally to Mira and Daniel, her voice gentle but strong. "Go now. Walk together in the light of your bond. Let your courage and truth guide each day, and know that you carry the trust of Syria itself." Mira's hand found Daniel's. She squeezed it gently, her silver skin warm against his. "We will not fail," she said quietly, her voice full of conviction. Daniel smiled faintly. "Nor will I let anything break this trust." The queen gave a small nod, her expression softening slightly. "Then go. The palace sleeps under watch, but the path you have chosen is yours to walk. Let it be guided by truth, courage, and loyalty." As they left the throne room, the hall seemed brighter, lighter than before. The tension of the night, the weight of conspiracy, and the challenge of the queen's test were behind them. Daniel and Mira walked together, their steps confident, their bond stronger than ever. Outside, the twin moons shone over the palace gardens. The soft wind carried the scent of blooming flowers and the promise of a new day. Daniel looked at Mira, her eyes reflecting the silver light, and he knew that no matter the trials to come, they would face them together. The queen's judgment had been given. The test was complete. And in that moment, Daniel felt the true meaning of loyalty, courage, and trust, not as words, but as living proof between two people who chose to stand together against the darkness. Mira's hand tightened around his as they walked through the gardens. "The night is behind us," she said. Daniel nodded. "And the future is ours to face." They moved forward together, leaving the shadowed halls behind, stepping into a future where trust and courage would guide them. The bond forged in danger and proven in truth was now unbreakable, and nothing in the palace nor in the world beyond could undo it.